Kyoko Okazaki is a name that's not really well known in the West in terms of manga and story writing. She hasn't been active in close to 30 years, and it doesn't really look like she'll be coming back anytime soon, but the list of work she's done and the small stories she's written are all unique, and capture time and place that's kind of their own thing. I'm going to talk about one of her bigger manga that she's written, which is River's Edge, a coming-of-age teen drama about the lives of Japanese teenagers growing up in the 90s. Okazaki's most famous work is her romance and social commentary piece, Pink, but I couldn't find it to read online, and I'm broke, so we're going to be talking about River's Edge today. Just as a content warning, this manga's got like all of this stuff, so if you're not comfortable with it, now's your time to leave. River's Edge, in its pretty short length, is a lot of things. Struggles with eating disorders, body image, relationships, sex and sexuality itself, and what it is to be a teenager. There's this kind of melancholy that permeates the manga that's unshakable. It isn't really a happy reflection of youth that a lot of Japanese media presents that focuses on high school. Being a teenager isn't fun, it can be a really shitty time in somebody's life, and River's Edge sees that. River's Edge, as you probably could have guessed, is a josei manga. A manga meant for primarily adult women. Josei is probably the most underrated manga genre there is out of the four big demographics, that being shonen, seinen, shoujo, and josei. This is the demographic that Okazaki primarily works in, as a lot of her manga focus on what it's like to be a woman, themes of feminism, and the current life in Japan as it was in the 90s, from a woman's perspective, as the 90s was the era of the new woman, which was a sudden boom in female empowerment. Okazaki was kind of seen as a new young figure in the manga world who challenged social norms and archetypes. I can't comment too much about this because I'm not a woman, I'm a guy. And the more I talk about it, I'm gonna sound like one of those performative male people who sip matcha and read period power with their wired earbuds and stuff like that. What's really sad is that Okazaki was forced to retire at a young age at 33 after she was hit by a drunk driver in 1996 and was left in critical condition to the extent of which she couldn't breathe on her own, and had to enter long-term extensive medical treatment. She hasn't published anything since 1996. She's still alive today, but there isn't much on her nowadays in English or anything. She's had an art book or two released to commemorate her work and a few art shows, and a couple of her manga have been officially published in English. But that's pretty much it for the last 30 years because of her accident. It's a pretty sad way to end things to her burgeoning career, but we still have a lot of things she's made to talk about in her time of being active. It's also one of the reasons as to what makes her work interesting is it's all set and trapped in the 90s, what was a current world at the time of its publication. It's a time capsule of what Japan was like when it was written. Before I get into the brunt of the story, I want to take a minute to admire Okazaki herself and her art, and just her general art style for how she draws her stuff. I really like her art style, it's really unique. It has this very loose and minimalistic quality to it that makes it kind of its own thing, but she has the ability to make it more detailed when moments get serious or there's a revelation that happens with the characters. It's kind of the art's way of changing itself to fit the mood of what's happening in the story itself. Alright, I've talked enough about it, it's time to get into what River's Edge is actually about. The story itself begins with Wakakusa and her friends trying to stop a gang of boys beating up the class outcast Yamada. The main boy who mainly targets him is Wakakusa's sort of boyfriend, but not really, Kananzaki, which is ironic as Wakakusa herself is kind of the savior for Yamada, as she actively contests Kananzaki to treat him fairly. Which, he doesn't. Yamada's almost a strange conundrum in this school that all of them attend. He's quiet, he's shy, and for that difference, he's built up popularity with the girls in their school, but for that same reason, he's disliked by the men, as he is different. So because of that one-sided popularity, he's a target, a point of frustration. There's also a rumor floating around that he's gay and cheating on his current girlfriend. Remember, this is 1990s Japan. Being anything straying from straight was kinda crazy back then. For making sure Yamada's alright, Kananzaki tries to pull Wakakusa aside to convince her to come back to his house, but Wakakusa plays it off and manages to slip out of his offer. However, later that night, Wakakusa's friend Inoue tells her about Yamada being stuffed in a locker by Kananzaki, so she runs out alone to free him from being stuck inside it. Genuinely, I'm not gonna lie to you, Kananzaki just, he's a gigantic fucking piece of shit, dude. He doesn't have any, redeeming qualities whatsoever. Wakakusa's walk home with Yamada is a meaningful one for multiple reasons. You see Wakakusa's thoughts towards the whole thing, likening her walk home with Yamada to an almost otherworldly experience. They're in two different places that just so happen to meet unexpectedly in the same spot. She also learns more about Yamada himself. He isn't as quiet as he's painted out to be. He's mad at people, he feels genuine anger and frustration for those who make his life hell. He's angry with both men and women. How men treat him like a bug that can squish between their feet, and how women ogle him and talk to each other like he's more of a symbol than a person. Dude's trying to get enemies on both sides, man. He also confides in Wakakusa that yes, he is gay, and he just simply is, and he doesn't really know how to truly be that. Something I like about River's Edge is its representation of queer themes in its writing. Yamada isn't a joke or a walking misunderstanding of homosexuality, he's a person. He's a young guy trying to find happiness for himself, which is a lot of people in River's Edge. It's just a thing he himself has to navigate. The next day, Wakakusa finds Kanenzaki and yells at him for stuffing Yamada in a locker overnight. They also have an argument later on that same day after Wakakusa heads to the nurse's office. He asks her why she always denies him and stops him from getting close to her even though they're supposed to be a couple. Well, the reason why is because Wakakusa lost her virginity with Kanenzaki after she decided to see what it felt like. She chose Kanenzaki and did it with him, and that's really the extent for why she even chose him. He was there to fill the void of the other half of her curiosity. Kanenzaki doesn't really understand this and keeps trying desperately to rope Wakakusa back over to him as that's how things are supposed to be. Wakakusa herself invited him to have a one-night stand with her, so in his mind, therefore he's entitled to her as she must want him. But obviously it doesn't work like that. Wakakusa is a person herself and she doesn't want him. She just can't make the final statement to push him away for good. Kanenzaki still wants sex, and since Wakakusa stops him at every point, he resorts to getting it from one of Wakakusa's own friends, Rumi, who he calls often to satisfy that want in himself. When Kanenzaki calls Rumi's house, we're also introduced to Rumi's sister as well, who initially picks up the phone when Kanenzaki calls. Her sister is everything that Rumi isn't. She's overweight, she's a shut-in, and she tries to butt her head into Rumi's life by looking into her diary. Kanenzaki and Rumi meet up at the exact same time that Yamada shows Wakakusa his secret that's at the river. He also brings cocaine for him and Rumi to snort, which I don't know how this dude, got cocaine in Japan. That kind of surprised me, but, yeah. Anyhow, Yamada's secret is the skeletal remains he found by the river sometime before, which he often comes back to look at in a weird way of comforting himself. Another classmate of theirs, Yoshihara, also knows the body and is already there when the pair come to look at it as well. I haven't talked much about Yoshihara because I didn't know how to cleanly slide her in, but Yoshihara is somewhat of a school idol. She's a model on TV, she has a perfect body that other girls want to be, and she has kind of a can't-do-wrong aura to her. But as you see throughout, the perfect image she's built for herself, like a lot of things set up in River's Edge, begins to crack and collapse as the story progresses. In Yoshihara's case, the cost of having an idyllic body is developing bulimia to keep her love of food going. She often goes missing during lunch to have food binges, followed by vomiting everything up as it all resets and no weight is actually gained. Her eating disorder and this completely self-destructive lifestyle she sets for herself begins to take more and more hold of her. I can't really show it on YouTube because it's graphic, but the cut back and forth between the reveal of what's at the river and the sex of Rumi and Kanenzaki built it up really intensely as it shows the skeleton buried in the grass. It's a release in two ways, one from, well, you know, and the other being the reveal of what's actually at the river. And why the river ties into the story and the title, but yeah. The reveal of what Yamada's treasure actually is what really gets the ball rolling in the progression of the story. Basically, shit just keeps getting worse. Wakakusa and Kanenzaki's relationship rots even more as Wakakusa threatens to leave him for good if he keeps on harassing Yamada. Kanenzaki has sex with Rumi in the school, while Yoshihara accidentally sees that she's having a binge-eating episode. Yamada begins to loathe his current girlfriend, Tajima, as the days go on, as he in reality feels no attraction to her whatsoever and is only with her because it's, again, the thing to do in society. And Yamada's treasure is put into complete jeopardy when an untrue rumor begins to float around that an old man who was the dead body at the river died in the brush next to the river, with his fortune with him. In reality, there is no fortune, the skeleton that lies there truly was just some old guy. But the promise of something causes the school student body to begin a search of the entire backlot of the school, where the river is, causing Yamada to freak out and fend off a lot from the other students to keep his secret safe. That same night, Yamada calls Wakakusa to help him and Yoshihara bury the body for good, putting an end to the search for both of their treasures. Neither of them really want to do it, but they feel they need to, because other people will know about it. And not knowing the significance of the body to them, they'll mess it up, and ruin it for the pair. To be completely honest with you, I don't know the exact reason as to why the body is so important to them, but my guess is that it's a physical reminder of death. It's what remains of the life that's gone now, and once you leave and die, the only thing left to the world in reality is your body. And that grim factor serves as a kind of reminder to the two about the predicaments in their own lives and what it means to keep on living despite things that are there to hold you down. To bury it means finally covering it so that whoever the person was can finally rest. During the time the group is digging the hole to bury the body, Wakakusa thinks about the absurdity of a situation that she's in. She's burying a skeleton, getting mud and dirt stained on herself along with a famous model right beside her. What Wakakusa doesn't really know is Yoshihara herself. She isn't exactly a clean person herself, despite what her external image presents. To attain that sense of beauty or balance or perfection or whatever you want to call it, it isn't really natural for anyone. Yoshihara pays a price for that with her eating disorder, which is spurred on by a twisted sense of control, to be that desirable self while still having the thing you love, the love of food. It can also be seen as a way of self-hatred in a way because Yoshihara is forced to sway to being skinny when that isn't really her natural disposition. Like, dude, like, food is hype as fuck, bro, to put it in a simpler way. And denying yourself of that isn't good for anyone. It only ends up really damaging yourself when you're trying to ironically be a better version of who you are. Yoshihara's character is model and actress culture distilled into a fictional character. And to put in context for 90s Japan, it's idol culture as well, really. I know I'm not really breaking new ground or anything by saying that idol culture and beauty standards as a whole are kinda bad, like that's hopefully a pretty common opinion. Like, people shouldn't mold or fool themselves to an unrealistic and perfect caricature of what a person should be. Idols have to give up everything about themselves to the public eye, and that's something not a lot of people, or realistically anybody, can really do. It really fucks you up, and so many people, more specifically women, end up with eating disorders because of this. Especially back in the 90s and 2000s when being deathly thin was considered better than looking normal. Yoshihara, in her own smaller and condensed way, represents this as well, with most of the girl student base idolizing her, and placing Yoshihara more so as a conception of what beauty standards should be rather than actually who she is as a person. Wakakusa is a little bit guilty of this herself, though it isn't like she's really to blame for anything bad. It's just what the culture was like at the time. All of this is stuff that Yoshihara has to live with, so she's pretty fucked up as a result. But she still has to attain an image of herself whether she likes it or not. It's ironically the whole that she's kind of dug for herself. The next day comes and Wakakusa is forcibly dragged on a date by Kanazaki, which is an attempt by Kanazaki to keep their relationship, if you could really call it that, afloat. He makes really corny attempts to win her over and in a way guilt trip her into staying with him, with Wakakusa believing him that she's a bad girlfriend who isn't there to support him when he's in his roughest spots. Which, as the reader, you know is complete bullshit, and Kanazaki is just a gigantic dickwad actively cheating on Wakakusa with one of her closest friends just to satiate his own gross sexual desires. As all this happens, Yamada himself goes on a forced date to the aquarium with Tajima, where she desperately tries with all of her might to get Yamada interested in her and their surroundings and feel anything romantic at all towards her. He denies every advance or comment that she makes and is stuck in his own world throughout the entire date, briskly leaving her without a second thought as he goes to see an older man he's basically being groomed by. As he walks away, something begins to rupture in Tajima, showing her inner thoughts. She's given purpose by Yamada as it's her own expectation for herself. She wants to be seen as important, valued, and loved. The whole metaphor I mentioned a minute ago with Yoshihara and her eating disorder could also be applied to pretty much every main focal character in this manga in different ways. They all have holes they keep overcomplicating and messing things up in, with a self-destructive ever-looping cycle happening that makes them sink further and further in. Yamada denies his sexuality and lets himself be groomed by an older man. The Wakakusa doesn't have the drive in herself and forethought to truly once and for all break up with Kanazaki. Tajima desperately wants a stereotypical boyfriend and won't stop destroying herself until she gets that. And going forward, you see her begin to lose more and more of herself as Yamada and Wakakusa's friendship becomes the only thing on her mind. Basically, nobody is really truly happy in this story. They all have problems and issues they constantly sink further and further into. But in a sense, that is part of what it's like to grow up. We all have issues we're forced to be wedged between before we manage to move on from or live with what that is. We have holes we sink into with mistakes and lack of self-care. It's your job to live through these things and get out of whatever place you're in to see whatever parts life has to offer you. Going further into the story, Wakakusa finds a hate letter in her locker, telling her to die over and over again, repeating throughout the entire page. She brushes off the letter at this point, but it'll come into play later. Rumi meets Kanazaki in the school to privately tell him the news that she's pregnant, likely with his baby. Kanazaki's initial reaction isn't shown, but knowing who he is, you can likely infer that he probably doesn't really give a fuck. The revelation of Rumi's sudden pregnancy drives her into her own hole, masking her pregnancy with simply being sick. She devises in her journal what the hell she's even going to do about the situation. She even debates having to marry Kanazaki because of her pregnancy. This is kind of a result of her and Kanazaki fooling around and the consequences they have to deal with because of it. They eventually meet up one night at the riverbank to talk privately. The reason why Rumi wants to meet outside is because she's worried Kanazaki will try to have sex with her. She asks him for money to pay for her abortion as neither of them really want the baby. Though upon hearing the price, Kanazaki is bewildered by the cost of the surgery, but he agrees to pay for at least part of it. Rumi thinks this isn't enough and decides to poke more and more at Kanazaki, trying to diminish him. This is when we actually learn more about who Kanazaki is, and it's that nobody really cares about him. His parents only care about what his older brother does, Rumi only used him for a fun time, and Wakakusa, his own girlfriend, if you can really say that, doesn't care for him and always brushes him aside with excuses. And the only thing he really does is cause more and more bad things to happen to other people. His existence is negativity. Kanazaki's only real purpose is to have sex. Sex is probably what makes him feel in control and worthwhile to anything. It's something propped up by society that sex is a kind of status, so that desperate drive to feel valued pushes him to do these things. To put it simply, he's a loser. Enraged by Rumi, he loses control over himself and pushes his fingers into her neck. She flops into the brush of the backlot, dead, with Yamada silently seeing the entire altercation. Yamada instantly and confidently confronts Kanazaki, basically goading him to hide the evidence, while Kanazaki begins to have a breakdown over what he's done. He begs Yamada not to tell anyone, but Yamada reasons for him to hurry up his freakout as wild dogs could begin to pick apart Rumi's body in the brush. He also says they could get Wakakusa and Yoshihara to help them out with extra manpower to bury her body. The thought of Wakakusa triggers Kanazaki to push Yamada for why he's always with her, which he just tells him that he's gay and he definitely isn't going to do something with him either. So there isn't really a reason for him to have anger towards him. I kind of like the way Yamada treats Kanazaki. It's his own way of getting a kind of revenge towards him for how he treated him before. Yamada doesn't do it through a violent or physical way, but he's just fucking cold to him. He doesn't offer him anything in kindness because why should he? Kanazaki is nothing but mean to him. Yamada treats people who see him as he is with kindness and respect in the case of Wakakusa and Yoshihara, and cold indifference with people who don't see him for who he really is, like Kanazaki and in a sad way his own girlfriend, who tries to meld him into something he just simply isn't. Wakakusa and Yoshihara arrive at the backlot and meet up with the two boys, but when they get to the spot where Rumi died, her body's gone. Unbeknownst to anyone, Rumi actually survived and got up after Kanazaki and Yamada left and trudged back to her house to recuperate after being choked. When she gets to her room, however, she finds her sister reading her diary and questions her about her escapades with random men, calling her a prostitute. The two sisters argue, throwing insults back at each other until Rumi's sister breaks and grabs a box cutter and begins to cut Rumi repeatedly out of anger. Outside of all this happening, Tajima tries to contact Wakakusa and Yamada's homes about their whereabouts, but when she learns that Wakakusa is apparently at Yamada's place, it makes her hole sink even deeper. With Rumi's body gone, the group of four don't know what to do, so Yamada and Yoshihara just sit back for home like nothing ever happened. Vote for Kanazaki with Wakakusa so close to him and in his sight. He targets her and slams her with questions for who she is. Scared for her own safety, she lies to Kanazaki and follows his demands, but she knows there's nothing real in her voice. Yoshihara tells Yamada to leave the two idiots, and so they begin their walk home. Though unbeknownst to them, however, Kanazaki begins to sexually assault Wakakusa multiple times out of anger and self-hatred towards himself. Which shows that, yeah, Rumi's right, all he cares about is sex. He wants somebody, anybody, to love him, and when that love isn't given, he forces it to be given to him in horrible ways. All of his actions only hurt people. There isn't really a positive to his character, and there isn't really a redemption. He just is a horrible person because he lets himself be one. While Yoshihara and Yamada walk back to their homes, they come across a blazing fire at Wakakusa's apartment complex. There was a charred body on the ground. Somebody had tried to burn down Wakakusa's house, and that charred body was Tajima. She had tried to set fire to Wakakusa's room and accidentally killed herself in the process. In the end, the person who ended up dying was Tajima, somebody left out of the conflict as a whole. She wanted a boyfriend to plug her need for one in society, and since she believed fully that Yamada was cheating on her with Wakakusa, she dropped everything in her life to get back at her under a suspicion. She was also the one who put the letter in Wakakusa's locker. She had no idea that Yamada was gay and she couldn't come to terms that Yamada hated her, so she didn't know who he really was at all, really. Yamada hated her because she didn't see him as anything. She saw him as a status piece to show her standing in the world, that she had somebody that reciprocated affection towards her. In some parts, she's like Kanazaki, who causes harm out of frustration when they don't get the required love they need. They both end up doing horrible things to other people. With everything that happened, Wakakusa and her mom choose to move to a new city to have a fresh start at life. Rumi also survived her attack, but she lost her and Kanazaki's baby in the process. Kanazaki himself carries on like nothing ever happened, even helping Wakakusa and her mom move their boxes. As Kanazaki waves goodbye and leaves, however, a grimace forms on Wakakusa's face. She knows he doesn't want anything to do with her now. She'll never see him again, and she never wants to see him again. It's infuriating that Kanazaki basically gets to walk off scot-free for what he did to Wakakusa, but that's sometimes how it is in real life, sadly. Sexual violence often doesn't get reported, and people like Kanazaki get the opportunity to move on with their lives, while the victims are left to deal with what happened to them. It's awful. Wakakusa does have a friend left over though, and that's Yamada. They end up talking by the bridge one final time before Wakakusa leaves this chapter of her life behind. Yamada finally really talks about Tajima. He point blank says he hated her for who she was when she was alive. He likes the dead version of her more than who she was when she was alive. She was selfish and narrow-minded. She never had the sight to see that Yamada didn't love her at all. So now that Tajima's gone and her anger and frustration stopped, he likes that more than when she was alive. It's a pretty cruel thing to say on Yamada's part, but that's how he feels. He adds on, however, that he does like the Wakakusa that's alive and with him right now. Wakakusa was one of the only people who treated him normally and saw him for who he really was. Upon hearing this, Wakakusa begins to cry, and the story fades out overlooking the water streaming down under the bridge. River's Edge has a ton of stuff packed into it for its 14-chapter run. The story is a kind of slow gut punch as you read more and more of it. You see it rise and you see it unravel with what happens to the characters. Something I find interesting is the moral ambiguity of its characters. Nobody's truly a good person in the manga. Sure, there's awful people like Kanenzaki, but people like Yamada and Okagusa aren't exactly perfect people either. So because of the way he's been treated all of his life, Yamada has an intense dislike for a majority of people. And Wakagusa herself to an extent kind of views Kanenzaki for sex as well, and never cut off their relationship for once and for all. She has well played with Kanenzaki's feelings. Now, does that mean she deserves what happens to her? Obviously, hell no, that's completely disgusting. But she isn't completely innocent herself. If you're comfortable with the maturity of its themes, there's a lot of stuff in scenes I didn't mention at all, or didn't know how to fit into the summary. So if you want to read it for yourself, there'll be more for you to see if you do. Okazaki's works I think are really unique and haven't been talked about almost at all in the West. The atmosphere and the feelings panels give you are unique, and it's a product of its time. It'd be interesting to see if Okazaki ever comes back to the manga scene. At this point, probably not. It's been 30 years, which is, well, sad. But I'm glad she's still getting recognition. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.